The sky over the planet was burning, not metaphorically, not poetically. It was actually on fire. Captain Elias Ward watched the orange clouds twist and break apart as his shuttle cut through the atmosphere. Long cracks of light split the heavens, caused by orbital bombardment from ships that no longer cared who lived below. The planet's name hardly mattered anymore. It was already being erased from every future map. 30 seconds, the pilot said, her voice tight. Scanners are a mess, radiation everywhere. Elias nodded, his jaw set. He had been through this before, worlds dying, people running, chaos swallowing everything. Still, something about this place felt worse. Too quiet, too final. The distress signal had been weak, old, and almost lost in the noise of war. Official command had marked the zone as unsalvageable. Civilian survival chances, less than 1%. Elias had ignored that number. The shuttle slammed down hard in what used to be a city square. Stone towers lay broken like fallen bones. Fires crawled across the ground. Somewhere in the distance, something exploded with a sound that shook the air itself. 10 minutes, the pilot said. That's all I can give you. That's enough, Elias replied, already standing. He grabbed his rescue pack and ran into the smoke. The species that lived here were not human. Taller, slender, pale-skinned with faint patterns along their faces that glowed softly when they spoke. Elias had trained alongside them once years ago, back when this planet still had embassies instead of ruins. He found bodies first, too many of them. He pushed forward anyway. Collapsed buildings formed narrow paths. Ash fell like snow. Elias scanned for heat signatures, heart pounding each time the scanner flickered. Most readings were false, burning metal, broken power lines. Then finally something different. A weak signal, very small. Got you, he muttered. He followed it into what looked like the remains of a residential tower. The lower levels had caved in, but a small pocket of space remained beneath a tilted support beam. Elias squeezed through, ignoring the pain as metal scraped his armor. Inside, the air was still. Too still. In the darkness, he heard a sound. Crying. It was soft, broken, and terrified. Elias froze. Slowly, carefully, he moved forward and lowered his light. A child stared back at him. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 by human standards. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes wide and glowing faintly blue. Dust covered her small body, and one side of her face was streaked with dried blood. She clutched a cracked data tablet to her chest like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. When the light touched her, she shrank back, fear flashing across her face. Elias immediately lowered his weapon and knelt. "It's okay," he said softly, using the universal translator. "I'm not here to hurt you." The translator took a second, then spoke his words in her language. The girl stared, trembling. Another explosion rocked the city. She screamed and covered her head. Elias moved without thinking. He stepped closer and placed himself between her and the outside world. "Hey," he said gently. "I've got you. You're not alone." She looked up at him then, really looked. Her eyes locked onto his visor, searching for something, anything that meant safety. Slowly, she reached out and grabbed his glove. That was the moment Elias knew he wasn't leaving without her. His comm crackled. "Captain, time's up. We're seeing movement in orbit." "I found a survivor," Elias said. There was a pause. "Command says negative, evac only if pickup is clean." "She's a child," Elias replied. Another pause, longer this time. "Captain, we can't guarantee." "I know," Elias said. "I'm bringing her anyway." He shut off the comm before they could argue. Elias carefully lifted the child. She was light, too light. She clung to him with desperate strength, burying her face against his chest armor. "It's going to be loud," he said quietly, "but I won't let go." The run back felt longer than the run in. Sirens wailed from somewhere deep underground. The sky cracked again and debris rained down around them. Elias shielded her with his body as they reached the shuttle. The pilot swore when she saw them. "You better have a very good reason." "I do," Elias said, strapping the child into a crash seat and securing her himself. The shuttle lifted off just as the square behind them vanished in fire. The child cried silently during ascent, her hand still gripping Elias' sleeve. He stayed beside her the entire time. When they broke orbit, the stars looked cold and distant. Only then did Elias notice the symbol etched into the child's tablet. It was a royal seal, ancient, unmistakable. His stomach dropped. "Oh no," he whispered. Back on the human carrier, alarms followed them all the way to the medical bay. Doctors rushed in, voices overlapping, scanners flashing. Elias stood back, hands clenched, watching as they cleaned the child's wounds. She didn't fight them. She only turned her head, eyes searching until she found him again. "She's stable," a medic finally said. "Malnourished, dehydrated, shock." "And her identity?" Elias asked. The medic hesitated. "You should probably hear this from Command." Command didn't take long. The room felt too small once the hologram activated. Several officials appeared, faces grim. "Captain Ward," one of them said, "do you know who you brought aboard this ship?" "Yes," Elias answered honestly. "A child who would have died otherwise." "She is Princess Salith," another voice said, "heir to the Virelian Conquered." Silence filled the room. "That planet," Elias said slowly, "was under protection." "It was," Command replied, "until the attackers decided treaties no longer mattered." Elias looked at the child through the glass wall. She was asleep now, fingers still curled like she expected the world to disappear if she let go. "What happens to her?" he asked. "That," Command said, "is complicated." They wanted to transfer her immediately. "Place her in diplomatic custody, keep her isolated, safe but alone." Elias listened, then he shook his head. "She needs a familiar face," he said, "someone she trusts." "You're a soldier," one of them snapped. "I'm a human," Elias replied, "and I was there." Another long pause followed. Finally, Command sighed. "Temporary guardianship until her people can retrieve her." Elias nodded. That was enough. The days that followed were strange. Salith barely spoke at first. She stayed close to Elias, following him like a shadow when allowed, sleeping only when she knew he was nearby. Loud noises still made her flinch. Fire terrified her. Elias adjusted without thinking. He spoke softly. He avoided sudden movements. He learned what food she would eat and which lights hurt her eyes. He told her stories about Earth, about oceans and rain that didn't burn. She listened. Slowly, she began to speak too, not much, just questions. "Why did you come?" she asked one night. Elias thought about it. "Because someone asked for help." "No one was left," she said. "You were," he replied. She considered that carefully. Weeks turned into months. Political storms raged outside the medical wing, but inside, something quiet and human grew. Elias never pretended to be her father. He never crossed lines. He was simply there, steady, patient, present. When the Virelian fleet finally arrived, Salith did not cry. She stood tall, wearing ceremonial robes too heavy for her small frame. Advisors bowed. Guards waited. She looked at Elias. "You will forget me?" she asked. Elias knelt so they were eye level. "Never," she nodded, satisfied. Then she did something unexpected. She placed her small hand over his heart and spoke a vow in her language. The translator struggled, then finally spoke the meaning. "You showed me what strength without cruelty looks like." Then she turned and walked toward her people. Elias watched until the doors closed. He did not follow. He returned to duty. Life moved on. Wars ended. New ones began. But somewhere in the stars, a child remembered a human who chose her when the universe did not. And that choice would matter far more than anyone realized. 20 years can change almost everything. It can turn a frightened child into a leader. It can turn a blazing battlefield into a quiet memorial. It can turn a man's sharp hair into gray strands and put weight into his bones. It can also turn one small choice into a story that refuses to die. Captain Elias Ward no longer wore a captain's rank. He still moved like a soldier, though. He woke before sunrise without needing an alarm. He kept his boots by the bed, lined up straight. He drank plain coffee and looked at the sky like he was still waiting for a call that might never come. His apartment was small, clean, and lonely. A simple place on Luna Station, where retired service people often lived because it was close to hospitals and far from crowds. Some days he helped train new rescue crews. Other days he worked as a safety advisor for cargo shuttles. It was quiet work. Quiet was supposed to be peace, but peace did not always feel good. On the wall, inside a simple frame, was a thin piece of metal the size of his palm. It looked like a broken shard from a fancy machine. Most people would not understand why he kept it. Elias did. It was a piece of the shuttle door from the day he pulled a child from ruins and ran through fire. A mechanic had cut it out later and tried to throw it away. Elias had asked for it without explaining. He did not need to explain. Some memories were not meant to be shared like stories in a bar. Some memories lived deep, quiet, and heavy. He had not seen Salith since the day her people came for her. He had seen news, though. At first, it was only small reports. A rescued heir returned. A shattered empire tries to rebuild. A young princess begins training under strict advisors. There were photos sometimes. Salith standing in formal clothes. Salith learning to speak in front of councils. Salith visiting graves with a face too serious for a child. Elias never saved the pictures. He did not want to feel like he was holding her life. He reminded himself again and again she was not his. She was not a project, not a symbol, not a weapon. She was a person. Years later, the reports changed. They called her Queen Salith now. The first time Elias saw that title on a public broadcast, he sat down hard on his couch like someone had punched him in the chest. Queen. She was not a little girl anymore, not the shaking child in dust gripping his glove in the dark. The woman on screen stood tall in a bright hall, surrounded by strange lights and ancient banners. Her face was calm, her eyes clear. The faint patterns along her cheeks glowed softly as she spoke. The translator converted her language into basic English. "We will not rebuild our future on revenge," she said. "We will rebuild it on protection. We will rebuild it on life." The Virelian advisors behind her looked nervous. Some looked angry, but Salith did not move. She did not flinch. She did not change her voice. Elias stared at the screen like he was watching a storm. She looked different, of course. Older, stronger. Her features had sharpened. Her posture carried the weight of a whole civilization. But the way she looked at the crowd, the way she held her hands steady, the way she spoke about civilians, Elias recognized something in it. Not his words, not his voice, but a kind of stubborn human belief. Life matters, even in war, especially in war. Elias turned off the screen and sat in silence for a long time. His coffee grew cold. He did not care. From that day onward, her name did not fade. It grew. Queen Salith the Reformer, some called her. Others used darker names: traitress, weak, human-touched. But she stayed on the throne, and her empire did not collapse. Against all expectations, it started to heal. She opened schools again. She punished corruption. She protected border colonies that had been ignored for centuries. She even offered peace talks to enemies that everyone thought should be destroyed. The galaxy watched her like people watch a dangerous experiment. Humans watched too. Some were proud, some were suspicious, some were afraid. Elias tried to avoid it all. He was no politician. No hero in his own mind. He was just a man who had done his job and made one choice that command did not like. Then one morning, his comm unit beeped with a priority call. Elias was in the training bay at the time, showing young recruits how to use emergency foam to seal a cracked hull panel. He wiped his hands on a cloth and answered. A woman's voice spoke, formal, official. "Elias Ward, this is Ward. This is Central Liaison. Please stand by for identification." A code flashed on his screen. It was real. His stomach tightened. "This is confirmed," she said. "Captain, sorry, Mr. Ward, you have been requested for assignment." "I'm retired," Elias replied. "So is the person requesting you," the woman said carefully. "In a way." Elias felt a chill. "Who?" There was a pause, like the liaison was choosing words that would not cause a diplomatic explosion. "The Virelian Conquered has requested your presence as a human representative for the Summit of 12 Systems." Elias stared. His mind took a second to catch up. "No," he said flat. "Mr. Ward, it is not a negotiation. It is a request under treaty. I'm not a diplomat." "We know," she replied. "That is part of the request." Elias looked around. The recruits were still working unaware. The training bay smelled like metal and oil. "Why me?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. The liaison's voice softened. "The request came from Queen Salith herself." Elias closed his eyes. 20 years and still that name could make his heart feel heavy. "I don't belong in that world," he said. "The summit begins in 4 days," she continued. "A transport will pick you up at 600 tomorrow." Elias wanted to refuse again. He wanted to throw the comm into a locker and walk away. But he remembered a small hand on his glove, a child asking if he would forget her. He exhaled slowly. "Send me the details," he said. The liaison sounded relieved. "Yes, sir, thank you." The call ended. Elias stood still for a moment, letting the noise of the training bay fade into the background. He was not ready, but maybe no one was ever ready for the past to return. The summit ship was huge, built as a neutral platform by a coalition that did not trust any one species to host important talks. It looked like a silver ring around a dark core, with docking arms stretching out like long fingers. As Elias boarded, he saw flags, human, Virelian, and many others he could not name. The air smelled clean, too clean, like a hospital. Security scanned him. A human officer checked his ID and nodded. "Your Ward?" the officer asked. "Yes." The officer's eyes sharpened with interest. "You're the one?" Elias did not ask what that meant. He already knew. People loved stories. They loved heroes and villains. He was neither. He walked through long halls filled with diplomats, guards, translators, and advisors. Some stared at him openly. Some whispered. Some did not hide their curiosity. He kept his face calm. A guide led him to a waiting room with soft lights and a window that showed the starfield outside. The room had comfortable chairs, a small table, and a pitcher of water. It felt like the kind of place designed to calm nervous people. Elias wasn't sure it worked. He sat, hands on his knees, staring at the glass. He wondered if she would come herself or send someone else. He wondered if she even remembered him as clearly as he remembered her. Memory could be strange. It could soften edges. It could change shapes. Maybe she had only requested him because it looked good for politics. Maybe she needed a symbol. Elias did not want to be a symbol. The door opened with a gentle hiss. Elias stood automatically, then stopped himself from snapping into full military posture. Old habits were hard to kill. A tall Virelian entered, wearing dark robes and a crown made of thin metal arcs that floated slightly above her head, held by invisible field tech. Her guards stayed outside. No weapons entered the room. She walked in slowly. For a moment, Elias did not breathe. She was Salith, but also not. The patterns along her face were more complex now, like living art. Her eyes were the same soft blue, but in them was a depth that only time could make. She carried herself with quiet power, not loud, not trying too hard, just present. Elias felt something in his chest loosen and tighten at the same time. She stopped a few steps away. "Elias Ward," she said in English without using a translator. Her accent was light, but her pronunciation was clear. He swallowed. "Your Majesty," Salith's eyes flickered. For the first time, her calm expression cracked into something human-like, something close to warmth. "You still speak like a soldier," she said. "And you speak like you've been studying," Elias replied before he could stop himself. Salith's lips curved slightly, a small smile, controlled but real. "I did," she said. "I studied many things." Elias nodded, unsure what to do with his hands. He felt awkward, like a man meeting a ghost who turned out to be alive. Salith looked around the room, then back at him. "You came," she said. "They told me it wasn't optional," Elias replied. Her smile faded, replaced by seriousness. "Even if it had been optional, would you have come?" Elias hesitated. He could lie, he could give a safe answer, but Salith's eyes were watching him, sharp and patient. "Yes," he said quietly, "I would have come." A deep silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with everything they did not say. Salith stepped closer and lowered her head slightly. It was not a full bow, but it was respectful. "I thank you," she said, "not only for coming now, for then." Elias shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you my life," she corrected. Elias' throat tightened. He looked away for a second, then back. "You don't owe me," he repeated more firmly. "I made a choice." Salith studied him like he was a rare book she still remembered reading. "You have not changed as much as I expected," she said. Elias let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "I changed, just slower." Salith's gaze softened, and for a second Elias could see the child behind the crown. Then her face returned to control. "Walk with me," she said. Elias followed her out into the hall. Guards moved aside, diplomats turned to look. Some bowed, some whispered. Salith did not react. They walked until they reached a quiet balcony overlooking a massive interior chamber where delegates gathered. Below them, lights and holograms floated. Voices in dozens of languages filled the air like a low storm. Salith rested her hands on the railing. "This summit is not only about trade and borders," she said. "It is about survival." Elias looked down at the chamber. "Whose survival?" Salith's expression darkened. "Everyone's." She tapped a control on her wrist. A hologram appeared above the railing, an image of deep space filled with strange shadows. "This is what our scouts found," she said. The hologram zoomed in. Shapes moved, long, dark forms like broken spears drifting between stars. The image was grainy. But the feeling it gave Elias was clear. It looked wrong. "These objects do not respond to communication," Salith continued. "They do not broadcast identity. They do not follow known travel lanes. They do not behave like pirates or nations." Elias frowned. "What are they?" Salith's eyes remained fixed on the hologram. "We do not know, but wherever they pass, colonies go silent." Elias' jaw tightened. He had heard rumors, missing ships, lost outposts, distress calls that ended mid-sentence. He had assumed it was normal conflict. But Salith's voice carried a different kind of fear, a fear that leaders tried to hide. The 12 systems do not trust each other, she said. Some believe this is a trick, some think it is propaganda, others think they can hide behind their borders. Elias looked at her. What do you think? Salith turned to face him. Her patterns glowed faintly, like her emotions were pressing against her skin. I think, she said, that we will die separately if we do not learn to stand together. Elias nodded slowly. And you want humans to help? I want humans to lead, Salith said. Elias stiffened. No. Salith did not look offended. She looked as if she expected that answer. You misunderstand, she said. Not lead with control, lead with example. Elias stared at her. Salith continued, her voice steady. When my world burned, many ships watched. Many governments calculated risk. Many leaders decided the cost was too high. Elias remembered the silence in Command's voice, the refusal, the cold numbers. Salith's eyes held his. One human came anyway. Elias felt his chest tighten. Salith looked away, back at the chamber below. My advisors call that foolish. Some call it arrogance, some call it weakness. She paused. I call it strength. Elias had no words. Salith leaned closer to the railing, her voice lower. You showed me that power does not have to mean cruelty. You showed me that rules can be wrong. You showed me that protecting one life can change many. Elias swallowed. I was just doing what felt right. Salith nodded slowly. Yes, that is what I mean. They stood in silence again, watching delegates move like pieces on a board. After a moment, Salith spoke again, quieter. Do you remember what I asked you when I left your ship? Elias' memory flashed. A child in robes, too small for her duty. You asked if I would forget you. Salith's gaze stayed on the chamber. I did not forget you. Elias' hands curled slightly against the railing. I didn't forget either. Salith turned fully to him now. The glow on her face patterns brightened, then dimmed as she controlled herself. I asked for you to come because they listened to titles and symbols, she said, but I also asked because I needed to speak to the human who saved me, not to the image of him. Elias met her eyes. Then talk, I'm here. Salith studied him like she was making sure he was real. I have enemies inside my own court, she said. They want me removed, they want my reforms ended, they say I am too close to humans. Elias frowned. Because you asked me here. Because I exist the way I do, Salith replied. Because I do not rule with fear. Elias' jaw tightened. That's not a weakness. Salith's expression sharpened. No, it is a threat to the old ways. Below them, a group of delegates clustered around a floating star map. Their gestures were sharp, their voices loud. Salith watched them. They will argue, they will delay, they will demand proof while the darkness moves closer. Elias looked at the hologram of the unknown objects again. So what do you want from me? Salith's eyes returned to his, steady and serious. I want you to remind them what humans are, she said. Elias almost laughed, but it came out as a rough breath. I'm one man, humans are millions. One man can still stand up in a room and refuse to lie, Salith said. I have seen it. Elias stared at her, and suddenly he felt the same pressure he felt in the ruins 20 years ago. A choice. Not about saving someone from fire this time, about saving many from what might be coming. Elias looked down at the delegates. He saw fear hidden under expensive clothes. He saw pride, greed, distrust. He saw a galaxy that might argue itself into extinction. He turned back to Salith. If I speak, I won't be polite. Salith's eyes narrowed slightly. Good, Elias exhaled. All right, I'll speak. Salith's expression softened for a moment, and Elias felt something like relief from her, but it was brief. Then she said, there is something else. Elias felt his stomach tighten again. What? Salith hesitated. It was a small thing, barely visible, but it was there. A queen hesitating. I do not ask this lightly, she said, and I do not ask it as a child asking a rescuer. I ask it as a ruler speaking to an adult who owes me nothing. Elias watched her carefully. Go on, Salith's voice lowered. My people's future is fragile. Our bloodlines were controlled for centuries by law and pride. It created weakness. It created stagnation. Elias frowned, confused. You mean politically? Politically and biologically, she said calmly. Our families narrowed themselves until our strength became thin. Elias' mind moved quickly, trying to understand where she was going. What does that have to do with me? Salith looked away, as if choosing words that would not harm. Because the old court believes my reforms are human sickness, she said. They claim I am unsafe to lead unless I prove my line will not end. Elias' eyes narrowed. They want you to produce an heir. Salith nodded once. Elias' face hardened. That's your choice, not theirs. It should be, Salith agreed. But they are willing to make it war if I refuse. Elias felt anger rise. He did not like this. He did not like any system that treated a person like a tool. Salith's gaze returned to him. It was steady, direct, and adult. They offered candidates, she said, from old families, from those who would chain the future to the past. Elias' jaw clenched. And you refused. I refused, she said, because I will not bring children into a world built on fear. Elias looked at her, and suddenly he realized what she meant by asking him here. His heart thudded hard. Salith continued, her voice even. I have studied humanity, not only its technology, its history, its survival, its ability to adapt, its ability to build family in many forms. Elias' chest tightened further. He forced himself to stay calm. Salith. She raised a hand slightly, not to stop him harshly, just to ask for space. I am not asking for romance, she said. I am not asking for a story that makes people gossip. I am not asking for anything immediate. Elias' mind was loud now, too loud. Salith's eyes held his. I am asking you to consider something in the future, an alliance that is not bought, a legacy that is chosen. Elias stared at her in shock. He did not answer right away because he needed to breathe, and because the weight of what she said was massive. He remembered the child in ruins. He remembered her tiny voice, but the woman in front of him was not that child. Still, Elias felt protective in a way he could not fully explain. Protective of her dignity, protective of the line between past and present. Protective of what was right, he spoke carefully. You're an adult, he said slowly. You're a ruler, you can ask me anything, but you need to understand what it looks like to outsiders, what it could sound like. Salith nodded once. I understand. That is why I speak with care. Elias rubbed his face with one hand. I don't know what to say. Then say nothing now, Salith replied. I asked you to consider, not to decide. Elias lowered his hand and looked at her. She was watching him with calm patience, but there was something else behind it, pressure, not from desire but from time, from politics, from survival. Elias felt anger again, not at her but at the system that cornered her like this. Before he could speak, the lights in the summit chamber changed color. A tone sounded sharp, urgent. People stopped talking, heads turned, guards shifted. A human officer hurried onto the main platform and activated a large display. Salith's face tightened. What is that? Elias leaned forward. The display showed a map of a border sector, a cluster of small colonies, mostly mining stations and research outposts. One of the dots blinked red, then 3 more. A voice echoed through the chamber in basic English, translated into other languages a second later. Emergency alert. Multiple outposts have gone silent. Last transmission indicates unknown contact. Defensive systems failed within minutes. A cold feeling slid down Elias' spine. Salith's patterns glowed faintly, betraying emotion she tried to hide. Fear, rage, focus. Elias looked at her. That's them. Salith did not deny it. Below, the delegates erupted into shouting. Some demanded proof. Some demanded evacuation. Some accused each other. Old habits of blame began immediately. Salith's posture changed. She was no longer simply a woman talking to a man on a balcony. She was a queen. She turned toward the chamber and began walking, fast and controlled. Elias followed. They entered the main hall through a side access. People stepped out of Salith's path. Her guards appeared around her, silent and alert. Human security moved too. Salith stepped onto the platform without waiting to be announced. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Enough, she said. The word was not loud, but it carried. The room slowed. Voices lowered. Salith looked across the delegates, her eyes steady. This is not a debate exercise, she said. This is not a game of blame. This is a predator at the edge of our homes. A delegate from a large trade empire sneered. You claim predators, you bring no body, no prisoner, no proof, only fear. Salith's gaze did not change. Proof is silence, she replied. Proof is the dead stations. Proof is the same pattern repeating. Another delegate shouted, And what do you propose, Queen? That we hand command to humans? Salith lifted her chin. I propose we hand command to competence, the hall murmured. Then to Elias' surprise, Salith turned slightly and gestured toward him. This is Elias Ward, she said clearly, the human who ignored orders to save one life on a planet your governments left to burn. The hall went quiet, eyes locked onto Elias. Elias felt heat rise in his face. He did not like attention, he did not like being displayed. But he also understood what she was doing. She was lighting a signal. She was telling them, here is what humans do. Salith spoke again. He will speak, and you will listen. A few delegates looked offended. Others looked curious. Some looked frightened. Elias walked forward slowly, feeling thousands of eyes on him. He stopped at the microphone. He didn't adjust it. He didn't smile. He didn't try to sound important. He just spoke in simple, direct English. "I'm not a politician," he said. "I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here because something is killing colonies and you're still arguing like time isn't real." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Elias kept going. "I've seen what happens when you wait for perfect proof. You get perfect funerals." A delegate snapped. "We require evidence before mobilization." Elias turned his head toward the voice. "Then send scouts, send drones, send something. But don't sit here and pretend the universe cares about your rules." He paused, letting it land. "I'm not asking you to love each other," he continued. "I'm asking you to survive." The hall was silent now. Elias pointed at the star map. "If those outposts fell in minutes, then your border defenses mean nothing. If your ships can't communicate with what's out there, then you're blind. And if you're blind, you need to stop fighting over who gets to hold the flashlight and start building a bigger light." Salith stood behind him, still as stone. Elias looked around the chamber. "Humans will not command your fleets. Humans will not own your worlds. Humans will not be traded like tools." He glanced briefly at Salith, then back to the room. "But humans will stand in the line with you if you stand like people, not like frightened animals biting each other." The silence was deep. Then a new alarm sounded, different from the first, sharper. A human officer ran up to Salith's side and whispered quickly. Salith's face changed. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the hall again. "New report," she announced. "The unknown contact is moving faster than expected." The officer activated a display. A line showed movement across sectors, straight, cold, direct. It was heading toward the summit's region, toward them, toward the gathered leaders of the 12 systems. Someone in the crowd whispered, "They know we're here." Elias felt his blood run cold. Salith's voice lowered, dangerous and calm. "Then we will show them what it means to approach a room full of survivors." Elias stared at the map. For the first time in years, he felt the same thing he had felt in that burning city, not fear alone, a hard, clear readiness. Because sometimes the universe tests a civilization, and sometimes the test arrives at your door while you are still talking. Elias turned slightly toward Salith and spoke quietly so only she could hear. "If they come here," he said, "this summit becomes a battlefield." Salith's eyes stayed on the moving line. "Then we will not lose," she replied. And the way she said it made Elias understand something simple and terrifying. The little girl he rescued had grown into someone who would not run from darkness. She would meet it. Right now, the galaxy was about to find out what she had learned from humanity when no one was watching, and whether it would be enough. The summit did not end. It transformed. What had been a room of arguments and careful words became a room of urgency, fear, and motion. Alarms continued to echo through the massive station, their sound low but constant, like a warning heartbeat. The unknown force was no longer theory. It was moving. Queen Salith stood at the center of the command platform now, no longer waiting for permission. Delegates who had once argued loudly now leaned forward, watching the same star map with pale faces. The red line representing the approaching threat cut through space with terrifying focus. It did not change direction. It did not slow. It was coming straight toward the summit. "They know," someone said again, louder this time. "They don't need to know," another replied shakily. "They just destroy everything in their path." Elias stood a few steps behind Salith, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the display. His mind worked fast the way it always had during rescues. Fear existed, but it was pushed aside by something stronger, responsibility. Salith raised one hand, the room quieted. "This station is not defenseless," she said. But it was never designed to face a unified external assault. A human admiral stepped forward. "We can evacuate key personnel." Salith turned to him slowly. "And leave the rest to die?" The admiral hesitated. Elias spoke before the silence grew too heavy. "If we run, we prove we can be hunted." Several heads turned toward him. "If we stand," Elias continued, "we learn something, either how to fight them or how not to die next time." The words were simple, but they landed hard. Salith studied him for a brief moment, then nodded. "Agreed." She turned back to the delegates. I will not force you to stay. Those who wish to leave may do so now, but understand this. Wherever you flee, this threat will follow eventually. No one moved. Fear held them in place, but so did something else. Pride, shame. Realization. A Virelian general stepped forward. What do you propose, Your Majesty? Salith's voice was calm. We defend together. The station shifted into battle mode. Lights dimmed slightly. Defensive systems powered up. Ships docked around the ring began to undock, forming a loose defensive pattern. Elias was pulled into a side command room with Salith, several human officers, and advisors from 3 other species. The air was tense, filled with overlapping voices and holograms. Range, Salith asked. 30 minutes, a human tactical officer replied. Maybe less. What do we know about their weapons? Another asked. Elias shook his head. Almost nothing, but they don't waste time. That tells me they don't rely on intimidation. They rely on certainty. Certainty of what? Someone asked. That whatever they hit, Elias said, dies. Silence followed. Salith folded her hands behind her back. Then we deny them certainty. She looked at Elias. You said humans will not command our fleets. That remains true, but you also said humans will stand in the line. Yes, Elias replied. We will. Salith nodded once. Then I ask you to stand here with me. Elias met her gaze. I'm not leaving. The unknown force arrived sooner than expected. The first contact was not an explosion. It was a sudden loss of sensors. Ships on the outer edge of the defensive formation simply vanished from the display. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone. What happened? Someone shouted. No energy spike, an officer said. No debris. It's like they were erased. Elias felt a cold pressure in his chest. They're not fighting us, he said quietly. They're removing us. Salith's jaw tightened. Can we see them? A pause. Yes, the officer replied, voice strained. Visual coming online. The main display shifted. The room went silent. The shapes were larger than expected. Not ships, not machines, not living creatures in any way the galaxy understood. They looked like broken pieces of space itself, long, dark forms that bent light around them. No markings. No engines, no visible weapons. They moved like inevitability. One of them turned slightly. A human frigate fired. The energy beam struck the object and disappeared, swallowed without reaction. No effect, the officer said. Another ship launched missiles. They vanished mid-flight. Fear rippled through the room. Salith did not step back. Do they respond to communication? She asked. The officer shook his head. Nothing. Elias leaned closer to the display. They don't answer because they don't negotiate. They don't see us as people. What do they see us as? Someone whispered. Elias answered honestly. Obstacles. Salith inhaled slowly. Then we change what we are. She turned to the tactical officers. Pull back the outer line, draw them closer to the station. That puts us at risk, someone protested. Yes, Salith said, it does. Elias understood instantly. You want to limit their movement. Salith looked at him. They erase things in open space, but near us they must be careful. Because, Elias asked. Because if they destroy this station, she said, they destroy every major leader of this region in one strike. Elias nodded. Predators don't take risks they don't need to. The plan was dangerous. But it was the only one they had. The defensive ships pulled back. The unknown objects advanced. When they entered close range, something changed. Energy readings spiked not from the attackers but from space itself. Gravity bent strangely. Systems flickered. They're interacting with the environment, Elias said. Not just us. Salith's eyes narrowed. Then they are not invincible. A Virelian scientist spoke quickly. Their field destabilizes local physics, but it costs them energy. Elias turned sharply. How much? Unknown, the scientist replied. But enough that they slowed when approaching the station. Elias looked at Salith. They don't like resistance. Salith's lips pressed into a thin line. Good, she tapped her wrist. Redirect all non-essential power into gravitational anchors. If space bends, we bend it back. The station groaned as systems shifted. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making some stumble. Then something incredible happened. One of the dark objects hesitated. It slowed. For the first time, it reacted. A murmur spread through the command room. Elias felt a fierce spark of hope. They can be stopped. Salith did not smile. They can be delayed. The unknown object pulsed. Space rippled. A shockwave rolled outward, slamming into the station. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered violently. Several ships were torn apart. Salith grabbed the railing to steady herself. Elias instinctively stepped closer, ready to support her if needed. She did not fall, she straightened. "They are learning," she said. Elias nodded grimly. "So are we." The battle lasted hours, not a traditional battle. No clean lines, no clear victories, just constant pressure, constant adaptation. Each time the defenders adjusted, the attackers responded with terrifying efficiency. But they did not overwhelm the station. They did not rush. They tested. "They're probing us," Elias said during a brief lull, "seeing what we can do." "Why?" an advisor asked. "Why not destroy us now?" Elias' voice was quiet. "Because they don't understand us yet." Salith looked at him sharply. "And that matters?" "Yes," Elias said. "Because humans survive by confusing things that think they understand everything." Salith considered that. The next wave came harder. One object broke formation and moved directly toward the station's core. Defensive fire concentrated on it. Gravity anchors screamed under the strain. "Core breach possible," an officer warned. Elias' mind raced. "If it reaches the core, we lose." Salith did not hesitate. "All power to anchors, overload them if necessary." "That could tear the station apart," someone shouted. Salith's voice was firm. "Then we tear it apart on our terms." Elias felt a surge of respect so strong it almost hurt. The anchors overloaded, space twisted violently around the object. For the first time, the dark shape fractured, not exploded, cracked. A sound echoed, not through speakers, but through the minds of everyone present. A low vibration that made teeth ache and thoughts blur. "What was that?" someone cried. Elias clenched his jaw. "Pain." Salith stared at the display. "They feel it." The fractured object pulled back slowly, its movement no longer smooth. The others followed. They were retreating. The room filled with stunned silence. Then cheers broke out, short, disbelieving, shaky. "We did it," someone whispered. Elias did not relax. "No," he said. "We survived." Salith turned to him. "There is a difference." "Yes," Elias agreed, "and they'll remember it." As systems stabilized and emergency repairs began, exhaustion hit like a wave. People slumped into chairs, some cried quietly, some laughed. Salith dismissed most of the advisors and officers, leaving only a small group. She turned to Elias. "Walk with me again." They moved through a quieter corridor, away from the noise. The station hummed softly around them, wounded but alive. Salith stopped near a viewport that looked out into space. The unknown objects were gone, leaving only darkness and stars. "We showed them resistance," she said, "but we also showed them where we are." Elias stood beside her. "That was unavoidable." Salith was silent for a moment. "You were right," she said finally. "They test, they learn." "So do we," Elias replied. She turned to face him fully now. Her posture was less formal, more tired. For the first time since he'd seen her again, she looked her age. "Today," she said, "the court will say I survived because of humans." "They're not wrong," Elias said. "And tomorrow," Salith continued, "they will say that is dangerous." Elias sighed. "People fear what they can't control." Salith's eyes searched his face. "And you?" "I fear things that don't care," Elias replied, "and systems that sacrifice people to feel safe." Salith nodded slowly. "Then we share fears." They stood in silence again, watching distant stars. After a while, Salith spoke, softer now. "When I asked you earlier about considering the future, I did not mean only politics." Elias felt the familiar tightness return to his chest. "I know," she met his eyes. "I will not decide under pressure, not from my court, not from tradition, not from fear of extinction." "I wouldn't accept that," Elias said. "I know," she replied. Salith looked back out at the stars. "But today showed me something. These things out there will come again, stronger, smarter." "Yes," Elias said, "they will." "My people will demand certainty," Salith continued. "A future they can believe in." Elias waited. Salith's voice remained calm, but it carried weight. "You showed them a different certainty today, one based on choice." Elias looked at her. "You don't need me to lead." "No," Salith agreed, "but I want you to stay." The words were simple, not dramatic, not loaded, just honest. Elias considered them carefully. "Stay how?" he asked. "As yourself," Salith replied. "As a human voice in a room full of old fears, as someone my people cannot dismiss as propaganda." Elias nodded slowly. "I can do that." Salith's shoulders relaxed slightly. She turned toward him again. "And in time we may speak again about what comes after survival." Elias met her gaze steadily. "In time." She extended her hand, not in command, not in claim, but in trust. Elias took it. Her grip was firm, warm, equal. Outside the viewport, the stars continued to burn quietly. Somewhere beyond them, something ancient had learned that the galaxy was not empty. It had learned that resistance existed, and it would return. But this time, it would not find a divided room arguing while the dark approached. It would find a galaxy that had been forced, at last, to grow up. And at the center of it stood a queen who had learned strength from a single human choice. And a man who was beginning to understand that one rescue long ago had only been the beginning.